today. I'm Sam Bogan, member of the Temple Beth Abraham Programs Committee, and I'd like to thank you for being here. I was planning to begin my introduction with something that happened 4.5 years ago, but then I realized that the real starting point needed to be a wintry day in Brooklyn, New York when I was 12 years old. A friend of mine convinced me that it would be fun to play Frisbee on our icy street with old, brittle 78 RPM records. It was fun, really evil fun, because when a Frisbee tossed was missed, it made what we thought was a glorious sound as it smashed into a million pieces on the street. I immediately learned my lesson, though, when I slipped on the ice and broke my wrist. Some years later, I grew to appreciate the hundreds of 78 RPM records that we had stowed in the basement of the house in which I grew up, alongside the crank phonograph that had been my grandparents' prized possession. I played many of the records and enjoyed them, and as relatives cleaned out their own basements, I welcomed more records into my collection. It was perhaps the 15 years that I spent working at the New York State Archives that made me realize that these records, which began as objects of entertainment, were now more importantly essential documentation of culture, which I already knew from my own experience was brittle and very easily lost forever. 4.5 years ago, now I'm coming back to the 4.5 years, when my wife and I prepared to move from our longtime home near Albany, New York, we tried to figure out what to do with the hundreds of records that occupied several shelves in what was then our basement. We decided to donate the bulk of them so they could be preserved and used for academic purposes. We donated many of them to the College of St. Rose for use in the program there, but didn't know what to do with the many Judaic recordings that we had, including Chazanut, Yiddish comedy, and many, many other things that were very valuable. I reached out to the Yiddish Book Center, imagining, like many people do, that they might be interested in collecting such things, but they told me that they didn't collect sound recordings. However, they did recommend that I contact the Dartmouth Jewish Sound Archive to see if my collection might interest them. In fact, it did, and as a result, my wife and I took a side trip to Hanover, New Hampshire to drop them off. Because many of you were probably not aware of this program, which documents and preserves Jewish history and culture for research, I began planning this event 3 years ago on behalf of the Programs Committee. We scheduled the event for May 2020, but I think you all know what happened. But at long last, I'm happy to welcome you today to learn about the Dartmouth Jewish Sound Archive, not only because I think you'll find it interesting, but because it helps me complete my penitence for destroying the records on the street of Brooklyn all those years ago. And Rabbi, I really think there should be a special al-Khaid for that. Our guest speaker today is Professor Alex Hartov, Professor of Engineering at Dartmouth since 1996. His professional interests have been in medical imaging, particularly for the screening of breast and prostate cancer. He's the holder of several patents in the field of medical imaging, robotics, and image-guided surgery. Professor Hartov has taught courses in digital image processing, electronics, and the science and engineering of music. It's these other interests centered around recorded music, sound, and sound restoration that bring Professor Hartov to us today. In 1992, he started the project that eventually became the Dartmouth Jewish Sound Archive, and he's been working on it in his spare time ever since. Please welcome Professor Alex Hartov.
Preserves a copy of everything I do. That way, if my house burned down, the archive is still going to be there. Well, I don't want my house to burn down, but still. What happens if you go to the Dartmouth Jewish Sound Archive? And this is kind of what you would see at first. It's no frills, but has a lot of stuff. If you wanted to search for a particular album, let's say this is one of my favorite performers here, Mikel. Did I spell that right? Yeah. So you can see it will tell you everything that I have that is either performed by or written by or that Theodore Mikel has something to do with. And you'll notice that I got a lot of the stuff. Yes, 1,504 items. out of 146,000 plus tracks in total. That's what you get for 20 years worth of work here. Actually, more than 20 years now. So that's just a first glance at the archive. Let's move on. I went a little too fast here. Online access. Yeah, okay, no, that was good. So one thing that I do try to keep track of, if only for the purpose of justifying the existence of the archive to Dartmouth, is sort of the cultural impact that it has. And I have to say that it was surprisingly high, at least in my estimation. Now, I'm an engineer, so cultural impact is not something that I get into measuring, but I do know about measuring the scientific writing impact of an article. This is something that my dean has been hounding me with for years. So I do know that this is one way people justify their existence. And I have tallied a number of things. First of all, we do have thousands of users worldwide, and I keep track of that so I can cite countries. Some are surprising, like Thailand, because there is a retired rabbi who decided to live there and is a regular, for instance. Academics, obviously, in a lot of places. In one instance, I was approached with a cultural attaché some years back who was looking for a very famous archive in the Ukraine, the Vernadsky archive of Jewish material, and could not get access to it through his links in the Ukraine, but he discovered that I had copies of a lot of their stuff. So I gave this gentleman access to the archive and was quite proud of being said that he couldn't get it anywhere else. Musicologists, that's obvious. Hazanut students, we used to be closely associated with the Hebrew College, which is a well-known institution in the Boston area. It used to be known as the Hebrew Teachers College, I believe. College students from a lot of different places, Yeshiva University of more recent memory. They had a whole bunch of people contacted me recently. Literature, Jewish studies, rabbinical students, performers. I've been approached by a number of performers. Radio programs when they're looking for some tunes, movie makers when they're looking for some Jewish material to make a soundtrack, historians, rabbis, cantors, and just folks looking to listen to the old tracks that they can't find anymore. So that's kind of the gamut of people that contact me. I have noted, I have actually many more than that, but this was not the academic audience that I often talk to, but I have a number of references to articles in the press, both academic and normal, you might say, talking about our archive. And some of the collaborating institutions, the Jewish Music Research Center at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Actually, we have a memorandum of understanding. I don't know what that means, but it's a legal document actually. With them for collaborating on cataloging and exchanging material. Mr. Sarusi here, Edwin Sarusi, is a good friend of ours and a friend of the DJSA. Hebrew College in Newton, Mass. They went through some shakeup over the years, but when we first started, we actually had two institutions wherefrom you could access the archive without any barrier, meaning directly from the network on campus, and that was Dartmouth for obvious reasons, and Hebrew College. We set it up so that their IP address block was directly allowed through. FAU, Florida Atlantic University, you may recall, had a Judaica archive online for a while. I don't know if that still exists. They kind of also faded from this kind of endeavor, but they were always very kind to send us their surplus. Whatever they didn't want to store, they would send. I got quite a big pile of records from these guys. The National Yiddish Book Center, Sam explained his woes trying to get rid of his record. Well, they know me. I've been there a few times picking up their piles of records. So they're considered friends to our project. And YIVO in New York. You must know the Yiddish institution. Same thing. When they want to make room in their record shelves, which happens every so often, I drive down to Manhattan, pick up the stuff, and go home. All right. So that's by way of introduction. Let's see what you can find in the archive. Now, I like to say that our only criterion for including material in the archive is that it has to be relevant to Jewish history and culture. There are no other criteria as far as I'm concerned. And so we don't call ourselves a music archive because that would be inaccurate. We have a lot of material that goes well beyond that, such as interviews, field recordings, radio transfers that were made at different times from the early days of radio to current radio programs that I was able to get from places like NPR or other places that contributed that. And so we have all sorts of stuff, not just music. And what I wanted to do here is to give you a glimpse, if you will, at some of the big collections within the overall collection on Dartmouth Jewish Sound Archive, in particularly the one that started everything here, and that would be the Joseph Toll Hour. So from that collection, I got a very large number of what I call commercial recordings, music that was available to anyone to buy, but also some of the unique material. When you prepared a radio program back in the days, sometimes you would pre-record it on those so-called acetate discs to be able to play them while you were not available to do it live, or just because it was an easier way to schedule time in a radio station. You send them the record and they play it in the slot where they could. So those acetates, I got quite a few from the Joseph Toll Hour, and a lot of them have very interesting announcements. This one will give you a glimpse at what the state of public health was back in the days.
So, Mr. Toll, I hope that the public will continue in increasing measure to join with us and lend a willing hand, a sympathetic heart, and a ready dollar to alleviate suffering among the needy tuberculous patients, and at the same time, remove the...
I don't want to belabor the point. So it was to me strange to discover that they had tuberculosis as a public health problem, but that's the kind of thing you can discover in a Jewish archive, right? Other interesting bits of information that I got is the kind of
Reuben Brothers, one of the oldest social caterers in New England, wish to announce that they have been fortunate in obtaining the Hampton Court Hotel for your party, for your bar mitzvah, for your wedding, or any small party.
I will not be.
No matter how large.
The point. So catering to the Jewish audience, advertising for Jewish businesses, for your bar mitzvah and other events, plenty of that. And then, of course, what's that?
From what year?
This particular one is 42. You see the, 47, sorry, 47. I had another one from 42, so I misspoke. One of the things that I note is that in 47, not 48, not 49, 47,
This is Joseph Dahl once again, hoping that this afternoon's program has added to your pleasure and relaxation. And on behalf of our sponsors and myself, I wish all of you a most enjoyable good afternoon. And
okay, so this was the use of Hatikva as the program ending. I found that interesting that in 47 they were already using that. So lots of material from the Joseph Toll collection, some of it quite interesting if you want to put it in a historical context of Boston in those days. Let me move on to another radio personality, that one from, let me see if I got that right, yes. From the Washington, D.C. area. Is there anyone from Washington, D.C. perhaps here? Yeah, well, but did you listen to the radio there? There used to be another gentleman who was big on the radio in DC. In fact, I found that he had an obit that still persists in the Washington Post. Mr. Resnick died in 1987, and he had ran the Jewish Hour in Washington, DC for 41 years. His wife, Mrs. Resnick, once contacted me out of the blue and asked me to take those records out of her basement. That was kind of a trip. My pickup truck is right over there. I had a similar pickup truck back in those days, and that thing was listing very badly when I got out of there. Another example of a radio station that had preserved a lot of its material over the years. And this is an announcement from the program.
Max Resnick presents the Washington Jewish Hour.
Oh, they went for the popular tunes, not for the end. So same thing, a lot of materials that was commercials geared for a Jewish audience based on a, I suppose, Jewish class of businesses, although not necessarily. And a lot of pre-recorded programs. And of course, a lot of what I call commercial recordings that were Jewish in character. In his case, interestingly, he had a lot of material that must have been sent to him directly from companies in Israel that I normally do not find in the US. And he had some really interesting stuff, definitely lots of it. Let me see what else I wanted to show. Okay, so yeah, quite a bit of material. I will not spend inordinate amount of time on that, but it was definitely a great find. It just so happened that we were going to see friends of ours that we knew from Israel in Frederick, Maryland on that very weekend that that lady called me. So couldn't get any better. I don't know how many of you are well acquainted with the various Hasidic and Orthodox communities in New York City, but there was a gentleman by the name of Benno Weiss, who was originally from the Frankfurt community. And apparently they have a particular way of doing the Nusach. And he spent a number of years recording all the variations. Now, I'm not exactly diligent in attending services or anything like that, but I do know that there seem to be a lot of variations in how one organizes the services based on many different conditions. And Mr. Weiss took it upon himself on a big old reel-to-reel machine to record every possible variation. He spent a number of years in the 60s, and I have all the tapes dated and all the tracks correctly labeled in his hand to preserve, if you will, that particular tradition for posterity, I suppose. I don't know how many should still follow that particular schedule or tradition, but if one were to want to start, we have everything you need for that. Let me see. Oh, incidentally, it's interesting to me. This is I deal with the request for accessing the archive, and often people will say, "Oh, I just want to listen to this, that, or the other, or I want to learn about Hazanut or whatever." A number of people, and quite a substantial number, contact me and say, "I want to access the Benno Weiss archive." Apparently, he had a lot of dedicated followers in New York City, and all of them are listening to that stuff. It was his granddaughter, yes. And let me just do quickly. You'll see first that we have 1,398 individual entries, and you can see that based on his notes and with the help of Louis, who is an expert at a lot of this, we were able to actually do a pretty good job of cataloging all this, so that if you're looking for a particular part of the service for a particular condition in the calendar, you could conceivably come up with something that is in the Frankfurt tradition. Let's see. Oh yeah, I have a couple of interesting examples. This is Dayenu. Now you all kind of remember the tune of Dayenu. Well, these guys don't do it the same way. Let me have you listen to that. Again, I will not play the whole track. We can listen to it after if you are interested. I'm going to try to go through the material first, then we can revisit anything you like. The other track that I wanted to play was Manishtana. And of course, this is one of the few that he didn't record himself. He grabbed a kid somewhere and had him record that.
Manishtana halalo semikola lelo shevhola lelo sono hui chomeki maso halalo ze kulo maso shevhola lelo sono hui shoyoga halalo ze moro shevhola lelo eno matbilin afilu parmahot halalo ze shite.
And you can see, if we take a close look at one of the boxes, this is inside the square box that holds the reels. He has everything cataloged, very, very diligent about marking the speed at which it was recorded, which for me was very useful. Recording the indexing on the counter. Now this does not necessarily follow, but if you know how to convert, you can actually use that. And the number of tracks, and more interesting, some the historian types the dates in which it was recorded. So this is one of the best documented material that I have. Okay. And back to here. Yeah, okay, so we saw what Benno had to contribute. So we had material coming from the Boston area. We have material coming from the New York area. And all of a sudden, out of the blue in 2008, some lady out of the Bronfman Jewish Education Center in Montreal asks me if I want to unload some of her records for her. And of course, I was quite happy to do that. The Bronfman Jewish Education Center is a very large facility used by a number of the Jewish communities there. It's a very large library. It's a 6-story building with just a lot of stuff in it. And at that time, they wanted to get rid of some of the audio material because, like many libraries, they found that it's unwieldy and not practical by and large, and prefer to put books or other things there. So I was happy to oblige. Much of the material I collected there was from yet another radio personality in Montreal, a gentleman by the name of Nachum Wilczewski. And we also have some of the material from that radio station. One of the anecdotes that comes with that one is that once I tried to get back in the US, the guys at customs said, "What you got in the truck there?" I said, "Don't worry, it's just records." I said, "Records? What's that?" So I had the good sense of asking for a letter from the librarian at the Bronfman Jewish Education Center. So the lady at customs who read the letter said, okay, you can go. So, but otherwise, I don't know what could have happened to me. Again, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the various currents of Hasidim. The Mojits folks were very kind to contact me in 2019, telling me that Mr. Ben-Zion Shenker's estate. Ben-Zion Shenker was a very prominent composer of Hasidic music. There are a number of, at least among the aficionado of that kind of music, very well-known LPs that were made by the Mojis Hasidim, which were basically the creation of Ben-Zion Shenker. And I was not very aware of that when I got this collection, but I have learned a lot since. They just wanted somebody to take all that crap and put it in a format that they could use, basically CDs. I said, I can do that. So I took the entire collection. Menachem Kozlovsky, a really nice guy. He wore a cowboy hat, unlike most of the Hasidim. And he came to Thayer School and delivered the stuff. I didn't even have to go get it. He later shipped me additional boxes. So I have a lot of their stuff, mostly reel-to-reel tapes. Now, this is interesting because some of it is studio tapes that they actually used to print those LPs that came out a number of years. So I have those. But more interesting, and I discovered how they did that, you know, on Shabbat, before it's the deadline, they'll turn on a tape player and just let it run while they're having their parties. And they have some really big parties and they sing a lot and make a lot of noise and hoot and holler and do all sorts of things. I have all that on record. So hundreds and hundreds of hours of the Mojis Hasidim having fun. And also a lot of a little bit more, how would you say, intimate recording sessions. Sometimes it's Ben-Zion Shenker all by himself, trying things on the piano with his voice. Sometimes it's him and his daughter playing and singing, and you know, a few things like that. So this is a fairly extensive collection, and in terms of the number of tracks, it's the largest that I have. That was, you know, a single donation. So I just wanted to give you a sort of a sense of what that collection consists of. First thing to observe is that I squeezed out 11,600 tracks out of these tapes. Well, it's not that bad. I mean, I wrote my own code to process the sound, so I can cut tracks pretty well, but a lot of that was still done manually. So the number of track is quite astronomical. The other thing that I find most interesting in this particular collection is that it's truly an exceptional list. I think some anthropologists someday will have a realization of how good the collection is. It hasn't happened yet, but so anyways, a few of the things that I could play for you from the Haggadah, Shel Pesach, Vehi She'amda. Do you guys know that song? I wanted to show you how the Mojitzer do that. That's very simple. So this was recorded under those conditions that I described, and he bangs on the table the rhythm for everybody to follow. So that's Ben-Zion Shenker. And then he sings, and those who want to sing, say, and sometimes you can hear in the background foot stomping, because those guys are also dancing while they're at it. And those tapes, this happens to be a cassette, but most of the time I have pretty large reels with that kind of material. And I find that he has a very nice voice, Mr. Shenker. I don't know if you agree. I mean, this was not a very good sample. Very nice and very recognizable. This is an example of one of the studio tapes. By the way, if I go over time, I have no idea what time it is because my computer doesn't tell me. Please let me know to shut up because I could go on for days. This is an. This is one of the studio tapes. Can even look at. Is there a date on? Where do you see that? Ah, yes, yes, 72 recording. Let me see. That's not the most interesting part. The most interesting part is to listen to some of the takes. So I think I picked one already in my program here. This one. Guy on the clarinet forgot. Yes. Well, sometimes they had a lot more. It's amazing how much time they put in that. Let me see. Another track that I really like out of that is this one. And this is perfect take.
Yeshua asi evitach v'lo yefchol ki ozi v'zim raska Hashem
I'll jump to the end.
li Yeshua I think
that's the one. I listened to that in my headset, so I could hear that very clearly. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there was a lot of banter and comments in all those tapes that for the right price you can listen to now. And let me see, what else did I, oh yes, I wanted to show you that this is not, how would you say, the Modges didn't just do tapes for their own entertainment. A lot of the material that you heard on the studio tapes was actually put out on commercial records, some of which were very well known. This is one of the first recordings that the Modges put together. Ben-Zion Shanker, Modgetzer, Melave Malkin Melodies. That's on a 10-inch LP, the earlier version of the long playing records. And on that, you can find all the songs that made Modget's singing famous. And over the years, there were many reissues of that. That one, I believe, is 1956. And let me see if I can get to, is that? Yes, okay, so this is perhaps one that you might, no, that's not what I wanted, sorry about that. I wanted this one here, for example. You may recognize this LP cover. I know that from all the people who donate the record, this is one with Theodore Bickel that I might find almost assuredly in a typical American Jewish home. There was something like that. And well, actually, that's an interesting thing because duplicates often will be identical. So then I make a choice of which one is better. And if I haven't already digitized, I'll digitize the better one. But interestingly, and this is by way of illustrating the popularity of a particular record companies didn't just print 100,000 because they knew it would be a hit. No. They'll print a few thousand, and if it's a hit, they'll do another issue. And often they will redo the label because they did not have enough foresight to save the stampers and all that. So you can tell the different issues by looking at the stuff. And so I use that as evidence of the popularity of a particular record. For example, Theodore Bickel's Jewish folk songs, there's like 16 different issues of that because it kept going. In one case, in fact, he re-recorded because they went from mono to stereo. They didn't have the original studio tapes in stereo, so they re-recorded it. Yeah, I'll play all that. I restore the audio to the extent that I can. Oh, yes, yes, it's in my house. You're welcome to come and take a look. Yeah, I have a lot of that. In fact, don't tell my wife. I'm sorry, I didn't hear. I have a lot of Zmirot. Which particular ones? Which bunch of Hasidim? I mean, which one is that? This one, this record? I have many different versions, so depending on what you want to listen to, pick one. All right, Anim Zmirot Quartet, and we'll play Shema Israel, number 2. Okay, yeah, can be done. So we'll jump to the request section here. I don't know if that's what you were expecting. With your permission, I will interrupt that. Okay, so I think I've exhausted the Mojit's topic. Let's see what else. Okay, so what I wanted to do on this page is to give you further glimpse to the extent of the collection, meaning that I have material that covers many different countries of origin, many different sources. I do have quite a number of private recordings that people contributed, different kind of extensive collection of family interviews that people have done. It's kind of hard to describe, but there is a very, very varied material. And then a lot of places, like, for example, Hanover College, when we got roots with them, they just simply unloaded whatever they had that was audio onto us. So we do have a lot of stuff. And some of the stuff comes from people who in and of themselves probably were not very famous, but I'm sure that some of you remember the name Jan Bart in the world of Jewish music. This is Gary Bart. His nephew sent me a whole bunch of stuff. He lives in California, and some of that is completely unedited material that never made it. Those are studio tapes of what appears to have been planned radio programs that I'm not aware of having been aired, nor are many of those recordings any of the published ones that I have found. So as an example, we'll do Diana, why not? This is the tune. And this is the material that I got. Reel-to-reel tape.
You recognize the melody, don't you?
Very nicely labeled.
Maybe it gives you the incentive to say Dayenu to me.
And you sound
I hope
very
not.
young, yeah?
But it's Dayenu, written in English by Mo Jaffe and Dick Hart, with English words. I hope you like them. It's a good piece of advice.
If today you're feeling healthy, even though you're not so wealthy, if you're healthy, then you're wealthy, Dayenu. If you learn to love another, even though he's not your brother, love another, he's your brother, Dayenu.
Okay, so this is just one small part of what this gentleman contributed, but it's largely personal in nature, unpublished recordings. Some of it very interesting, some of it perhaps not so. So I have a lot of that. Field recordings. Now, this is something that I have a lot of that. So I consider a lot of what Ben Ovest has done to be field recordings. Same with Louis, my friend in this project. He's British, he's from London, and he has actually done some programs on the BBC in which he interviewed folks like the daughters of Eliezer Ben Yehuda, the gentleman behind the revival of Hebrew, and she explains how they were the how would you say, the guinea pigs of the Hebrew language, because they were the first family to use it every day at home. So that's one of the things that I have. Some folks that we know personally, like the Khan from our extended family in Israel. Moshe Etzi, a friend of the family in Israel, is a gentleman who tells me the story of how he came to Yemen. He explained to me very interestingly that back in the day when this exodus started, there was a rumor going that the Mashiach was already there in Israel. It's time to go. So much for gossip, right? Lula Katz, a woman that I met in Vilna. Now, she was one of the folks kind of giving us the history of the Jewish community in Vilna, because that's where she's from. She spoke Yiddish, which I don't speak very well at all, but she also knew Russian, which I can talk. So we had some interesting conversations with her. This gentleman here is a resident of Newton, Massachusetts now, but was born in Isfahan, Iran, and gave us a very interesting first person telling of life in Iran, which prior to the Khomeini era was actually quite good for the Jews, it seems. A gentleman who had various businesses in between Poland, a rabbi from Germany, and a few more. So a lot of field recordings, which if you are interested in listening to these sort of testimonials, we have quite a few. Do we have time? I don't know how we're doing with that. What's that? You guys mind staying a little longer? All right. I like to present a few items that I won't go through everything, but at least a few. One is a sampler. Well, I call this page sampler. These are recordings that I have I don't know why I kind of glommed onto them. I find them interesting. This upper left one was given to me by a gentleman in Israel. And it is a recording. I don't know if you can hear well. The introduction of the recording is going to be in Hebrew. And if you don't get it, I'll try to catch you up with it.
مسيرة إيرة إسرائيل لم يدبا ليشار مبيا لكنسين بطامة رشونا بمروكو الياد مزمريك بوتسات غردون دايرتس.
So to kind of keep it simple, for the first time in Morocco, a song from Israel called Lamidbar, done by the choir in Fez, Morocco, more or less. Since you're a fluent speaker in Hebrew, you might correct me. Another song. So the interest I find in that is that this is not a commercial recording. So a Jewish community in Fez apparently had the means to hire somebody with a recording equipment, which this particular kind was not easy to come by. It's I don't know, but I presume it is in the 50s, because that kind of technology did not really readily exist prior to that. Yeah, so that's a guess on my part. And we're able to, first of all, there were a substantial number of Jews still in Morocco back then, which is an interesting fact in and of itself. They had a community that clearly was in touch with Israel. They knew the songs, they spoke Hebrew, and they spoke not the Old Hebrew, but the modern Hebrew, for one. So that's to me a very interesting little historical artifact. Can't date it because the gentleman who gave it to me didn't know what that was. He just had it. Edley, Moshe Edley. Let me see another interesting item. Oh yes, a curiosity item here. This is to illustrate how some melodies are pilfered from one culture to another. And I don't know in this case in which direction that happened. You may recognize this song.
Reb Dovidl, der Vassilkover, Boinchon jetzt in Talen. Reb Dovidl, der Vassilkover, Boinchon jetzt in Talen. Reb Dovidl, ist mit uns zusammen. Kommt schon Bücher zu sein Tisch, die Teure nicht versammeln. Reb Dovidl, ist mit uns zusammen. Kommt schon Bücher.
We won't go through the whole song, but I have at least a few dozens different versions of that song, very well-known Yiddish song. To my surprise, I discovered in a pile of records that was not part of the Jewish collection at all, this French record. A little bit dramatic, but
Tire l'aiguille, ma fille, demain tu te maries, mon ami. Tire l'aiguille, ma fille, ta robe doit être finie. Sous tes doigts naissent des fleurs, faites de paillettes, de diamants. Le diadème d'oranger, porte bonheur, est entre les mains de ta maman. Lai, 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 tire l'aiguille, ma fille.
So the same exact melodic construction, slightly different selection of a beat and possibly a key, but it's interesting that the melody is almost identical. There's a little variation, but the cultural context is absolutely no relationship. One is about Reb Dovidol in some Yiddish settlement somewhere, and this is about a mother encouraging her daughter to complete her trousseau so she can get married. And there's no context of a Jewish anything in that. It could be conceivably, I don't know if they had that practice of building a trousseau, but that's definitely very much a French thing to do, or was. I don't know now, you go to the supermarket or something. So a curious coincidence here, which I don't have an explanation for, and if you do, I would be interested in learning. Let me see, something that most of you here might recognize.
Seigneur, tu as mis au monde beaucoup trop de pauvres gens. Mais s'il n'y a pas de honte à être pauvre, il n'y a pas de quoi en être fier non plus. Quel mal y aurait-il si j'avais une petite fortune? Oh, et si j'étais riche, oh, et si j'étais riche, de moi. Hey, adieu la charrette.
This was sent to me by a very kind gentleman in France with whom I had some correspondence, Michel Abraham. After I pointed out to him that I was unable to find that record, which I knew from when I was in France, existed but couldn't find it, so he sent it to me. Ivan Rebrov, a pseudo-Russian. He was actually German, but he banked his career on being a Russian singer. Very good Russian singer, I might add. I like him a lot, but he's definitely not Russian. Let me see. Well, I think it's best that I end here, and if you guys want to play a request or something, I'd be happy to do that, but I don't want to force my time on you at this point. Maybe you have some questions. Yes, tons. But comedy takes time to listen to. You can't just cut in the middle of it. But yes, Myron Cohen, any number of the very famous Jewish comedians. I have that somewhere. Myron Cohen is the best known, but let me see, Gepsel and Shepsel at the baseball game and all that kind of stuff. What was the comedian there? I forget stuff. That's my problem. Mickey Katz, yes, all of it. Let me- Sorry, what did you say? Yes. You want to play that? Okay. Okay, so Michael Rosenberg. He was a very well-known one. I used to call him Michel because I'm French, but I was corrected once by Larry. He said, "It's Michel, you idiot." So yes, a lot of Michael Rosenberg and others, old comedy, definitely quite a bit. You had a question, Sam?
Yeah. How much description do you do?
Okay, so that's a tender topic because in the early days of the archive, I was able to recruit students readily and exploit their cheap labor to do that kind of work. Now I'm kind of forging ahead with the digitization and posting, but I'm not as diligent with cataloging. And if you know anybody who wants to do that, just send them over to me. I'd be happy to have assistance with that. But yes, so what I do to answer your question actually is this. Anytime I have material in the form of a commercial recording, then that's easy because I use the information that's given for the track name, performer, album name, and I name my files that way so that then when I process this stuff, it automatically gets entered in the right places. So that's easy. I coded that thing myself. That's the easy part. But when it's more complicated material that I have to edit out of a longer track, then somebody needs to put a name to it and put some context to it. That's a little more difficult. Yeah, totally. That's me. That's my work. Everything you see here. Any more questions? All right, I'm out of here. Oh, actually, I showed a slide very briefly, and I should have been a little bit more diligent about this. We did have funding in the initial phase of the project from Dartmouth itself. Provost Barry Scher, who was a friend of the project, it's fair to say, would give us $4,000 a year to be able to hire students and have work study student to work on that. And that's why I was able to have this initial effort. At one time, my friend Louis Glinner, who knows people in the Boston area, found a gentleman who was in charge of the Fidelity Fund who gave on 2 occasions $12,000 to the project. That was also very nice, but that's about it. Otherwise, it's all volunteer work. Stupidity would be the most obvious answer. No, actually, I enjoyed working with audio. Just realized I'm running out my battery here. To answer your question, well, it's really personal interest, nothing more. Also, people have asked me where I find the time. So I like to tell them anytime you watch TV, just think of me working on that. Well, that's only partially true. I don't have to listen to everything while it's being transferred. I have multiple stations that can run at the same time. So I can do 4 LP transfers simultaneously. I mean, I have to attend to it when they end and all that stuff. The only time that I really have to pay attention is if there is a need to edit the tracks because my code does not work well with things that have narration, things that have very soft passages, that kind of thing. But otherwise, a lot of it is automated. But I do listen to a very large proportion of it, yes. If I do that, I'll have to blow my brains out. So I don't want to do that. Oh, Jean asked me how much time I spent on this project, and I refused to answer. Yes, sorry, go ahead. Yes, yes. He has a few. I have them. Yeah. Well, I don't have all of them, but I certainly have a few. That I could not answer because everything I have of his comes from the published recordings. Well, some of it is secondary, meaning like this is Doina Naftuli. This is one that he composed, but it's played by Itzhak Perlman. Naftuli, Brandwein, Emerson. So those were small record companies. Emerson, if I'm not mistaken, is from the Boston area, actually. That's an example, Naftuli, Brandwein. And if you wanted to play it, that I cannot answer, but it's conceivable. Dem Rebens, Husid. He was a very good musician, but it is said that he was also quite a drinker. Maybe that's why he played so good. He didn't know he couldn't do it. But I also have Dave Taras, who was commercially much more successful, but also a very outstanding performer. Yes, and they had a little bit of a rivalry, I think. You had a question, Sam?
Yes. What you have assembled here as temple
Yes. The plan is that I've been nudging Dartmouth to try and get the collection off my back. And I think I'll get there eventually. The archive online, I think, is pretty safe. Even if I were to disappear, they would get it going. They like it. Yeah. That's a good question. A lot of people would think that you need to go to the extremes of digitizing, 24 bits, 96 kilohertz and all that good stuff, or even worse. But that's, let's just say that it's putting effort where it's not going to pay back, because the source material to begin with, particularly in the 78s, is very poor compared to what you can get with CD audio quality, all right? So my standard right now is 16-bit, 44.1 kilohertz, and that has served me very well. On a few occasions where I have material that I recorded myself, I do indulge in 24 bits, sometimes 24 bits, 96 kilohertz, but I don't find that it is necessary. And I speak from my poor hearing and my analytic knowledge about the topic. You don't gain much by doing that. Yes. No. Well, okay, I should be careful. The audio that I transfer from the original material is uncompressed. In order to stream on the service that we use, which is Amazon, I don't remember what it's called, S3, Amazon S3, whatever that is. They have facilities for streaming MP3 files. So I transfer that into MP3 and they're happy with that. But I have all the original material in uncompressed form. So, yes. Ah. That I wouldn't know, but I can tell you where that photograph comes from. Can't say because I don't know who they are. And I don't recognize the name you said. This photo is one that was used by Sapochnik. What's his first name? Henry Sapochnik, on one of his LPs for Folkways. And when I talked to him, I met him a couple of times, but I met him once at the conference in New York. I asked him if I could use that, and he said, sure, it's from Yivo, it's public domain. Okay, okay. I did not know that. It's conceivable that I have recordings by them, but I don't know because I never knew who these people were. Yes. Ugandan, yes. Ethiopian Falashas, yes, I do, but I don't. I don't know how to attribute that because it's from the Folkways group, and I don't know where they made those recordings. So it's from Ethiopia, but I don't know more than that. It's an LP that Folkways released back in the 50s, so it predates their moving to Israel. And the Ugandans, they did their own recordings. They're good at promoting themselves in a sense because that's good revenue. Yes. Just send me an email or you go online to, let me see, to this link here, which will appear magically in a moment. Can't type there. So this link that you see in the upper left there, djsa.dartmouth.edu, will get you here. And if you're not a registered user over here, it will say register link. You send me a request, and if you tell me who you are, I'll approve it no matter what you say.